Amazing transformation. Millionaire's mother humiliated on birthday, but son discovered the truth. John Miller stared into the polished glass of his office window, watching the bustling streets below. At 34, he was a self-made millionaire, the founder of a tech startup that had reshaped the digital landscape of his Midwestern town. Yet, as he pondered the upcoming birthday celebration for his mother, Ruth, an unease clawed at his insides. This party was supposed to be a tribute, a moment to thank the woman who'd sacrificed so much for him. Instead, he felt a rising tide of anxiety. What if she felt out of place among the affluent friends he'd invited? He winced at the thought of her walking into the lavish venue, her simple dress and humble demeanor stark against the backdrop of wealth and elegance. Would the world he'd built around him make her feel inferior? John tried to shake off the fear. He wanted her to see how far he'd come, to celebrate the fruits of their struggles. But what if it backfired? What if having all this wealth cast a shadow over her humility? It gnawed at him like a relentless parasite. What if her past, one filled with sacrifices and missed opportunities for happiness, emerged to haunt this evening? As he made arrangements for the party, the tension weighed heavily in his mind. Friends who had once been nothing but supportive now echoed thoughts of elitism, whispering over wine glasses about those who had chased ambition and those who had failed to keep up. John was caught in the middle. He thrived in the world of opportunity, fueled by hard work, yet couldn't shake the guilt that came from knowing Ruth had never experienced that same success. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the night began and guests filled the room, John's heart raced, the call of celebration merging with the dread of revelation. Laughter and chatter filled the air until one careless comment from a well-meaning childhood friend cut deep. Can you believe Ruth never got to enjoy the success of a real artist? The room fell silent, the wooden floors echoing the weight of her words. John's stomach twisted with shame as he gazed at Ruth's face. The joy of celebration dimmed, replaced by a look of humiliation. He felt like a fraud. All the accolades, the riches, meant nothing if they came at the cost of his mother's dignity. What had he done? In that heart-stopping moment, John realized he had always chased success, but perhaps he had never fully grasped the pain in her past, the pain of dreams abandoned, unfulfilled. Shadows loomed over the glamour of the evening, and with each stare from the guests, he felt himself being pulled in two directions: the life he'd built and the truth that lay buried beneath it. A determination simmered inside him, ignited by the anger he felt towards the very world he had devoted himself to penetrate. He would dig deeper, understand his family's history, and honor the artist his mother had once been. But the knowledge that he risked everything, including his reputation, for this mission was terrifying. Every thread of bravery pulled against an overwhelming urge to retreat. Could he do it? Could he bring forth the artistic legacy of a single mother that had been snuffed out by the oppressive duty of survival? As the silence hung heavy in the air, an electric tension coiling tighter around his chest, he knew this was just the beginning. One revelation hung in front of him, waiting to explode. The truth of Ruth's forgotten brilliance and the reluctance that now intertwined within him to resurrect it. The path ahead was fraught with consequences, but one thing was certain: he couldn't go back now. The fight was on. John stood in the middle of the room, the echoes of laughter and clinking glasses fading into a dull roar around him. The comment his friend had made ricocheted in his mind, keeping him rooted to the spot. How could he have let this celebration turn into a tableau of humiliation for his mother? The shimmering chandeliers and designer outfits felt suffocating. Everything he had worked for now seemed hollow in the face of Ruth's unsteady smile. Regaining some composure, he made his way to the corner of the room where Ruth stood, her hands clasping a frail bouquet, visibly uneasy among the chatter of the elite. He swallowed hard, a rush of guilt coursing through him. "Mum," he started, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry they said that." She placed a hand on his arm, her touch both grounding and disarming. "John, you've done so well. Do not let their words weigh on you. This is your moment, not mine." But the tremor in her voice contradicted her reassurance. Anguish bubbled within him. Her humility, the very thing that shaped his success, was now the shackling weight that threatened to pull them both down. He needed her to know she was more than the sacrifices she made, more than the artist who faded into obscurity. He felt an embers of resolve igniting. Could he turn this moment into something transformative, not just for him, but for Ruth as well? As the party progressed around him, his mind raced with plans. He imagined an exhibit, one dedicated to her fading artistry, pieces she had once showcased with pride starting from when he was a child. The vision took shape, walls adorned with her work, reflections of her journey, and a narrative told through the lens of her life. He saw an opportunity not only to honor her, but to uncover the mother he had grown distant from in pursuit of wealth. He quickly excused himself, stepping into the hallway where the air felt lighter. Each inhale brought clarity. Each exhale dispelled the suffocating doubt. He pulled out his phone, typing a message to a local gallery director. "I need to discuss a potential exhibition. It's important." But then self-doubt crept back in, thick and heavy. Could he convince the art community to extend their reach? Would they appreciate the depth of his mother's artistry after so many years silenced? Anger bubbled again, this time at himself, his narrative of success overshadowing the real story deserving light. He couldn't let this thought spiral further. He needed to act, to leverage his connections, to forge this opportunity. As he returned to the gathering, he caught a glimpse of Ruth again. She was standing alone now, gazing at a family photograph on the mantel, a frozen moment in time that encapsulated happiness within simplicity. Would they ever return to that joy, without the weight of expectations? Steeling himself, John approached her, removing any semblance of pretense. "Mom, I want to talk about your art. I want the world to see it." Her eyes widened with surprise, worry etched across her features. "But what if they laugh, John?" He shook his head. "No, this time it's different. You deserve to be celebrated for who you are, not dismissed because of what they think." The moment hung between them, a fragile thread of hope woven into fear, but with the potential to ignite a fire. Would she trust him to lead her back into the light? As she looked deep into his eyes, searching for sincerity, the air shifted. The resolve between them grew sturdy, a bond redefined by a shared purpose. But realization dawned. This was just the tip of the iceberg. Each revelation would bring forth more turbulence. Could their relationship withstand the scrutiny of a world that seemed to whisper disdain? John felt the gravity of the mission ahead. This was no longer just about honoring Ruth's past. This was a confrontation with every tear, every sacrifice, every moment lost in the shadow of doubt. Somewhere in the depths of his mind, the climax was fast approaching. He knew this journey would demand everything from him, and as the crowd swirled around, anticipation thrummed in his veins. The moment had come when they needed to claim their truth back from the sidelines. What challenges awaited as they stepped into this new chapter of their intertwined destinies lingered in the air, unspoken but heavy with possibility. The days following the celebration flattened into a blur of urgency for John. His mind raced with ideas of the exhibition, fueled by both excitement and the fear of failure. He spent hours in front of the computer, researching gallery options and reaching out to art critics, intent on mapping out the landscape of the opportunity before him. The need to shed light on his mother's obscured talent drove him, yet nagging doubts loomed like storm clouds, threatening to overshadow his determination. Could he, a man who built his identity on the whispers of wealth and success, truly navigate the world of art? Despite his connections, he had little experience in curating an exhibition, let alone handling the sensitivities of reviving Ruth's artistry. Each message sent buzzed with anxiety. Each reply awaited felt like a potential rejection of everything he hoped to achieve. To settle the tumult within, John started delving into his mother's past, sifted through decades of journals, sketchbooks, and neglected canvases, a chaotic array of vibrant colors and jarring lines that expressed emotions he had never witnessed. With each piece he unearthed, he felt an expanding gulf between who he was and the man he aspired to be. Each brushstroke spoke of times when Ruth translated her suffering into beauty, a language that felt foreign yet deeply rooted within him. But as he uncovered these small treasures, he also felt the weight of the spotlight that was beginning to shine on Ruth again. What if the world rejected her? What if applause turned into ridicule? The fear morphed into his greatest adversary, a lingering presence that shadowed his every step as he laid the groundwork for the exhibit. Uncertainty wrapped around his spirit, pushing him to question whether this was worth risking the fractured bond between him and his mother. One evening, as he sat at his desk, mulling over notes, he decided to approach her again, this time more thoughtfully. Drawing upon every fragile thread of courage, he invited her to join him for a walk. She nodded, concern flickering in her eyes, but he noticed a nascent curiosity there too. As they strolled through the park, John broached the topic of her work. He spoke passionately about the art scene, about how her voice could create ripples, how the world needed to hear her story and see her triumphs. With each word, he navigated through the maze of her worries, drawing her closer to the vision that had ignited his resolve. "But I'm just one woman," she replied, her voice a tangled mixture of hope and fear. "What can I possibly offer to such a world?" John paused, choosing his words with intent. "You offer truth, Mom. You offer the beauty that comes with overcoming. The world needs to hear it, needs to feel it. They deserve to know your journey. It's profound and real." For a moment, he caught a glimpse of something shifting in Ruth's expression. Could it have been the spark of understanding, the threads of a shared dream weaving tightly between them? But the lingering fear remained, clinging to her. "I don't want to bring shame, John. What if it fails?" His heart raced at the vulnerability in her voice. "We can't let fear write your story anymore. Let's together present what you've created. Let's create a narrative that celebrates you, the artist you are, not defined by their judgment." The conversation deepened, merging their vulnerabilities into a new foundation, a stepping stone built on mutual risks taken for the sake of authenticity. Ruth's reluctance began to ebb, replaced with tentative empowerment, as the weight of her past began to lift off her shoulders. As they returned home, John felt a new energy coursing through him. The bond re-established, the shared dream of a new beginning flickering to life. Yet, beneath the excitement, lurked the unavoidable tension of what lay ahead. How would the world respond when they finally let in the light that had lain dormant for so long? Every small victory came with its own risks and uncharted territories, ready to challenge their resolve once more. With the imminent meeting with the gallery director approaching, John knew they were on the brink of a pivotal moment. The engagement with their shared past would demand not just courage, but honesty in confronting truths. Could he secure a future that embraced both his mother's artistic story and their reconciled relationship? The anticipation wrapped around him. The stakes had never felt so high. And as he stared at the empty canvas of possibilities, the question haunted him just as fiercely. What would happen if they took the plunge together, only to find their past still haunting them amidst their new goals? With a week to go before the meeting with the gallery director, John's pulse quickened each morning, as dread and determination battled within him. The conversations with Ruth had ignited a flicker of hope, yet uncertainty still strung tight in his gut. Every time he envisioned her standing before an audience, he felt the imprint of her vulnerability washing over him, each possible moment of rejection siphoning breath from his lungs. His mornings transformed into rituals of strategizing, involving meticulous plans on how to best frame her art. Expanding beyond the research phase, John dedicated hours to envisioning the exhibition's layout, crafting narratives for each piece to convey Ruth's story eloquently. He wanted to contextualize everything, the struggles, the triumphs, even their fractured relationship. Yet, beneath his meticulous preparations, doubt echoed louder. Did he have the wisdom to distill a life lived into art? Compelled to confront his own fears, John spent a significant afternoon reflecting on how his life had been shaped by avoidance. Avoidance of vulnerability, of failure, of the darker recesses of his family story. He gulped down frustration as he mulled over how he had submerged his true self beneath layers of expectation and success, masquerading as someone who had it all figured out. On one of his exploration trips through old neighborhoods to gather inspiration, he stumbled across a small gallery dedicated to local artists. The colors splattered against the walls felt fresh. The atmosphere buzzed with passionate conversation. Yet, observing the artists present, he noted how they bore both their struggles and triumphs tentatively, engaging deeply with the community, offering authenticity in every stroke. It dawned on him. Authenticity was the bridge to connection. Fueled by this revelation, John decided then and there that he would present Ruth's journey not only as an artist, but as a woman emerging from shadows into light. He envisioned incorporating elements of her past, the repressed emotions, the struggles against public opinion, and the beauty of her resilience through the artworks. Ruth's story had more layers than he had previously understood, and he felt a twinge of excitement mixing with his trepidation, an unexpected synergy. By dusk, his energy was palpable as he returned home, ready to share this newfound understanding with Ruth. Eager to expand upon their plans, he prepared a detailed outline of potential exhibition themes and narrative arcs, excited to finally craft a project that spoke not merely of art, but of a rebirth. He placed the papers on the kitchen table as they sank into their usual evening routine. Ruth entered, her soft presence seeming to wrap around him, and he felt a sense of urgency. "Mom, I've been thinking," he began, catching her eye with purpose. He explained the community-focused elements he envisioned intertwining with her artworks, allowing viewers to see the emotional landscapes tethered to each painting, to feel the weight of her experiences and those echoes of her past that weren't merely obstacles, but vibrant chapters of her story. Ruth listened, critical eyes glancing from the ideas he laid out to the underlying intent. Her own journey reflected through the lenses of others. Protective shadows crossed her face, but he could sense the flicker of doubt she struggled against. "What if they see my pain instead of the beauty?" she whispered, and in those words, John confronted his own echoing fears. "They will see both," he replied, grounding his presence with resolve. "Your pain is part of your beauty. It's real, it's messy, and it speaks louder than any perfect facade ever could." As they talked late into the night, a new kind of understanding began to materialize. John felt them inch closer to something transcendent. With every exchange, each expression of vulnerability restored more of the bond that he had begun to think of as lost. As the conversation ebbed, the weight of their uncharted journey loomed again. Tomorrow would bring not just a meeting with the gallery director, but the potential to change their narrative entirely. Yet, questions clung to the air like whispers. Would the risks they planned to take truly pay off, or would the fear of their pasts rear again? The culmination of these thoughts gnawed at him as he prepared for bed, sleep evading him. He felt the stirrings of a pivotal door waiting to be opened, but the uncertainty surrounding the outcome left an unsettling pit in his stomach as he closed his eyes, one question echoing through his mind. Would embracing their truths lead them to redemption, or deeper, into darkness? The sun rose on the day of the meeting, casting a golden hue across John's kitchen. He moved through the motions of breakfast, a hollow rhythm in his chest. Today was pivotal. The gallery director's evaluation would shape not only Ruth's artistic future, but also John's understanding of his own potential as an advocate for her voice. He felt the weight of expectation as he poured coffee, necessity bound with anxiety. As he contemplated the outline he had prepared, John recognized the underlying fear that had lingered throughout his life, the fear of exposing oneself. He had hidden behind accomplishments, behind the pretense of having it all under control. Maybe today, moving forward, would benefit from a radical shift in his approach. He would step from the shadows and embrace vulnerability, first in himself, then in Ruth's art, and finally in how that art would resonate with the public. Facing Ruth over breakfast, He tried to contain his apprehension. "Mom," he began, practically grappling with the words, "today is about laying bare everything. The art, your experiences, your pain." Ruth's brow furrowed, skeptical. What if they don't understand? What if they judge? The tremor in her voice pierced through him, igniting a familiar pang of anxiety. He wanted to reassure her, but he wasn't sure he possessed that certainty himself. They might. But isn't that the risk worth taking? Our truth can forge connections. Can we let go of what people think and focus on what we know is real? Her hesitation hung in the air, thick and palpable, and John's own resolve felt fragile against the looming doubt. He wasn't just pushing her to risk vulnerability, he was doing it as well, in their shared goals. How could he expect her to courageously step forward when he still wasn't entirely ready to accept the fallout of revealing his insecurities? As they headed to the gallery, the stirring possibility of transformation buoyed John's resolve. He observed the city around him, its edges blurred by the growing frenetic energy of a Saturday afternoon. On the surface, everything appeared normal, but beneath it lay stories, silent narratives waiting to be acknowledged, much like Ruth's. Upon arriving, the gallery breathed an atmosphere of creative chaos. Each wall, adorned with movement and color, screamed authenticity. The gallery director, a sharp-minded woman with an piercing gaze, waited with her team. In that moment, John felt a rising tide of resolve wash over him. He couldn't afford to tiptoe around the raw power of Ruth's work. "Mum," he whispered, positioning their presentation materials with intent. "Let's not hide behind polished words or perfect presentations. Let's dive into the chaos of it all." With a nod, Ruth steadied her breath, taking strength from his presence, and a flicker of courage ignited in her eyes. The director approached with an inquisitive demeanor, surveying the spread of artwork and documentation on the table. As John began to articulate Ruth's journey through the thematic lenses they had curated, he bypassed the rehearsed narrative. He drew upon emotions, connecting dots between art and experience, invoking the depths of Ruth's struggle, and unapologetically revealing the intricate dance of light and dark that defined her story. Ruth chimed in, her voice crackling at first, before rising with newfound strength, recounting moments that carved her existence, each testimony mingling hope with stark honesty. Their interaction with the director transcended mere presentation. It felt like a cathartic unraveling, both terrifying and exhilarating. But even with progress blossoming within the warmth of that small room, a grim undercurrent whispered uncertainties. The director's silence often lingered too long, her eyes darting critically over each artwork, and every hesitation sent tendrils of doubt creeping back into John's mind. Was their message getting lost in translation? As they wrapped up, he sensed a shift in dynamics. The director's brow furrowed as she pondered, seemingly weighing the implications of their bold honesty against the gallery's reputation. With a final question hovering on her lips, the long-awaited verdict rippled in the air, dense with anticipation. Whether it would open a door to opportunity or thrust them back into a cycle of rejection remained a potent mystery. The moment of decision was coming, but before it unfolded, John felt a primal urge to protect all that they had just shared. With everything on the table, he wondered inwardly if their desire for vindication would be fulfilled, or if this leap towards revealing their truths would lead them to face the very shadows they wished to leave behind. His heart raced with an electric urgency. Now was the time to confront whatever lay on the other side of this moment. What would their next move be if their vulnerability led to acceptance or rejection? The gallery director's lips tightened as she finally broke the silence, her eyes darting between Ruth's artwork and John's fervent expression. "Let's be frank. You've both certainly put yourselves out there," she began, her voice steady, yet slightly edged with skepticism. "But raw emotion doesn't always translate into sales. This work, it's personal. There's beauty here. But how do we sell this story?" John's heart plummeted. Did she miss the point entirely? Stepping forward, he felt an impulsive need to grasp the reins of the conversation, to direct the narrative back to where it truly mattered. But isn't that the essence of art, to provoke thought and emotions, to create a dialogue. His own voice trembled, the weight of the moment threatening to crush him. Ruth stood beside him, her hands trembling slightly, but there was a fire igniting in her eyes. John caught her gaze, and an unspoken agreement passed between them. They were allies in this fight, both invested in pushing the boundaries of acceptance. It was time for him to confront his own doubts for the long haul. The director's expression softened ever so slightly. A flicker of curiosity ignited in her gaze. If you believe in the power of that work, I suggest anchoring your narrative. Help me understand the marketable angle, the universal truths that can resonate beyond your personal story. John nodded, taking a step back yet fundamentally aware of the gravity of his role as an advocate, not just for Ruth but for both of their identities, which hinged upon art's vulnerability. It's about the human experience. In Ruth's work, pain and pleasure dance together. Those who view it can see themselves. They feel their own stories reflected back. Ruth, emboldened by John's fire, interjected, "And what I've experienced, loss, love, joy, those feelings can connect us. My art isn't just meant to be hung on walls, it's meant to be felt." John marveled at the strength behind her words. Until this moment, he hadn't fully recognized the depths of Ruth's resilience, the way she transformed her struggles into power. This was the discovery he sought, not just for her but for himself as well. He had always seen himself as a guardian of her narrative, but in essence, he hadn't fully embraced his own story either. The director seemed to deliberate, her expression shifting as she grappled with their unfiltered submission. Yet John felt the weight of his own truth pressing down. It was not merely Ruth's vulnerability on display, but his too. Faced with the director's hesitance, a sudden impulse surged through him. They would take control of the next step. What if we create an interactive experience, a living installation that engages viewers directly? What if we share pieces of ourselves through a mixed media showcase? A beat of silence followed his proposition, leaving twinges of hope caught in his chest. The director's eyebrows arched in surprise, a flicker of inspiration crossing her face. Unorthodox. It could be risky, but— "Risky is where the magic happens," John said, interrupting, emboldened by insight into his own development. He was no longer a distant observer. He was a participant of this journey. "If we don't challenge the norms, what are we doing?" "I'm in," Ruth added, palpable energy radiating from her. They watched the director consider their shift in direction, and John's heart raced, an instinct urging him to keep pushing. Could this radical idea ignite a spark that would resonate beyond the gallery walls? "All right," the director replied, her tone transforming into one of guarded intrigue. "Pitch me the details. This might be the breakthrough we need." They both exchanged mirroring looks, sensing a relentless pull towards the unknown as the stakes rose. John could hardly believe how swiftly they had shifted the conversation. While that thrill warmed him, it also ignited a gnawing concern. Would they hold up under the mounting pressure? The gallery manager re-entered the room, interrupting their momentum and bringing fresh faces into the mix, while casting cautionary glances. John's pulse quickened. The looming pressure intensified. This meeting was only just beginning, and there was still much to unfold. As they outlined their ideas amidst the growing audience, John felt a sense of foreboding creep back in. Was this proposal simply a blind leap into chaos, one that could either soar or languish beneath scrutiny? In the heart of that crowded gallery, new tensions brewed. Was their vulnerability enough to carry the weight of acceptance? John braced himself, fully aware that every moment spent in the spotlight could lead to absolute creation or painful condemnation. The atmosphere thickened with unresolved questions as yet another individual approached, one bearing a name he had known as a significant antagonist in his past, a figure who embodied every single doubt he had long carried. John's breath hitched. The time had come to face the shadows of his former self. The energy in the gallery shifted as John recognized the familiar figure approaching, a renowned art critic known for his cutthroat reviews and penchant for exploiting vulnerability. Lucas Caldwell sauntered towards them, a glimmer of derision in his eyes. John's stomach soured. This was not just an adversary, but a reminder of a past riddled with self-doubt. "Quite the presentation," Lucas remarked casually, his voice oozing with condescension. Interactive installations? What a bold move for artists who still struggle to refine their skill set. John fought to keep his composure, feeling an urge to lash back, but instead he inhaled deeply, grounding himself in the moment. This was not about defending their art against Lucas's mockery. It was about embracing what their work truly meant. With Ruth standing beside him, he felt a flicker of courage ignite within. "Thanks, Lucas," John replied, forcing a semblance of calm into his tone. "We believe art should extend beyond the canvas. It's an invitation for dialogue and connection." "Oh, I do admire your enthusiasm. But enthusiasm doesn't pay the bills, does it?" Lucas shot back, folding his arms defiantly. Ruth clenched her fists at her sides, ready to retaliate. John sensed her brewing anger and placed a gentle hand on her arm, a silent signal for her to trust him. He knew if they allowed themselves to fall into Lucas's trap, it would only reinforce the insecurities lurking beneath the surface. "I used to think that too," John said, choosing his words deliberately. "But if art can't communicate raw truths, what's the point? We're ready to evolve and share our processes with others. Let's challenge convention and offer something tangible." Lucas raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued but unwilling to show it. "And in doing so, you're just exposing your weaknesses. The market isn't interested in vulnerability without polish." Something within John snapped. He realized this was not merely an opportunity to defend their work, but a chance to confront the lingering doubts he carried. The memories of his past failures flooded his mind, each echoing an insecurities ingrained from years of scrutiny. But confronting Lucas, this symbol of his uncertainties, was precisely the crucible he needed. "Perhaps you're right, Lucas," he continued, his voice steady now. "But what I've learned is that those weaknesses are precisely what make us authentic. They are what connect us to audiences on a deeper level." He dared to hold Lucas's gaze, recognizing the challenge swirling in its depths. Was he prepared to dismantle the critic's facade? Fueled by a sense of purpose, John found his footing, welcoming the discomfort of accountability. Ruth stepped forward, placing herself in John's line of fire, radiating a fierce determination. "We are not afraid of any judgment. This installation is about stripping away facade to reveal what's real and raw. It's storytelling in a new medium." Lucas's smirk dimmed slightly, a hint of recognition dawning in his eyes. As they stood together, united, John felt a swell of strength. The bond he had formed with Ruth was transforming him. He was no longer just a bystander. He was a force. "Just remember," Lucas warned, recovering his stance, "art is a fickle endeavor. Your hearts might be in the right place, but that won't shield you from backlash." As he turned to leave, John felt the tension lift, if only slightly. He was keenly aware that this confrontation was only the beginning. The path ahead was fraught with risks, his newfound sense of purpose challenged by the critical world outside. "Maybe that's where growth happens," John called after him, a bold assertion born from his fresh resolve. He could feel Ruth's supportive smile at his side, their shared strength intertwining in the aftermath of the confrontation. John was ready to transform doubt into determination, to pursue their vision with conviction, even if it meant risking everything. Suddenly, as he glanced around the gallery, he noticed a small group eyeing their installation with curiosity, their interest undeniable. Could this very interaction serve as the ignition for a wider acceptance, beyond the limits of the critical eye? In that moment of realization, a rush of determination coursed through him, but old fears certainly lingered, waiting for an opportunity to creep back in. Would their vulnerability translate into genuine connection, or would it be met with harsh criticism they weren't prepared to face? "Let's refine our pitch," John suggested to Ruth, urgency in his voice. "If we're going to own this concept, we need clarity. How do we ensure our message resonates? It's time to hone in on our narrative before Lucas's voice swells again. We can't falter now." As they began outlining their vision, John felt the weight of possibility settling on his shoulders. The stakes had never been higher, and he was standing at the precipice of growth. He took a deep breath. This was merely a step towards the greater confrontation looming ahead. Little did he know, Lucas's presence was just the beginning. There were bigger critics waiting in the wings, and soon John would need to confront not only them, but the truths about himself he had yet to uncover. The real test was still to come, lurking just beyond the horizon of this burgeoning journey. John's pulse quickened as he and Ruth settled at a nearby table, sheets of paper scattered around them filled with notes, sketches, and thoughts. The echoes of Lucas's derisive remarks hung heavily in the air, but no longer were they shadows overshadowing their path. They acted as a catalyst, igniting a new fervor within him. "Let's start with our core message," Ruth said, her brow furrowed in concentration. "What do we want audiences to feel when they experience our installation?" "Connection," John replied without hesitation, his mind racing with potential. "We want them to see themselves in our art, to engage with truth and authenticity." Ruth tilted her head, encouraging him to elaborate. "Go on." "Art has become a commercial product, stripped of its soul. By breaking down the barriers, we invite viewers to confront their own experiences. This is where we can thrive," he explained, his voice gaining momentum. How could he have overlooked this for so long? The essence of their work lay in vulnerability, not as a weakness but as a bridge to deeper understanding. They worked late into the evening, weaving their rough notes into a cohesive narrative. Each idea sparked a shift in John's understanding of their artistic vision. There was a line they had been hesitant to walk, but how freeing it was to embrace the risk that came with authenticity. As clarity emerged, so did an unsettling realization. Even within their bubble of ambition, criticism would loom like thunderclouds above their heads. Each polished concept was a potential target, and doubts could resurface at any moment. The more he pressed forward, the more he prepared himself for inevitable backlash from those who would never grasp their intent. "John, what if Lucas's prediction is true?" Ruth's voice pierced his thoughts. "What if our vulnerabilities don't connect? What if we expose ourselves only to be ridiculed?" He felt her concern ripple through him, but instead of fear, a flicker of incredulity ignited within. "Ruth, think about it. Isn't that the very essence of art? For every criticism we may face, there will be someone who resonates with our truth. What matters is the dialogue we create, honest, painful, beautiful dialogue." Each conviction steeled John's spine. The self-doubt that had been an incessant companion began to retreat. This was their moment, a pivotal turn in the narrative of their journey. He was no longer just reacting to Lucas's provocations, he was crafting a response, a manifesto even. "Okay," Ruth conceded, a determined light in her eyes. "Let's do it. Let's make them feel something worth remembering." With a newfound swagger, John felt the full weight of their vision on his shoulders. Sketch after sketch began to take form. He visualized not only the installation's components, but also the tension that would arise from confronting audiences with uncomfortable truths. This wasn't merely about showcasing art, it was about wrestling with the messy, complex emotions that defined humanity. As they pushed into the early hours, the exhaustion began to set in, yet John hardly noticed. Amidst the dim lighting of the gallery, he found himself immersed in a dialogue that challenged not only his creative prowess, but his understanding of self. Each idea not only advanced their artistic mission, but also urged him to confront the barriers he'd erected against vulnerability throughout the years. Yet as dawn broke and they stepped back to assess their work, a shadow of doubt reverberated yet again. This transformative journey had unveiled a depth of potential, but would it withstand the scrutiny of a wider audience? The ultimate test remained, a confrontation not only with external critics but with their own fears of rejection. "Let's prepare, Ruth," he said, steeling himself for what lay ahead. "We have to embrace the backlash, whatever it may be. It's time we show everyone who we really are." As they began rehearsing their presentation, adrenaline surged through him, a rush of both fear and anticipation. Would they emerge victorious, or would this reveal their greatest vulnerabilities to a judgmental world? With Lucas's taunt still echoing in his mind, John understood this was only the prelude. As they prepared, waiting for the world to react, an unsettling thought took root. The real battle had just begun, and the stakes were higher than he ever envisioned. What awaited them at the dawn of exposure? Would they seize the narrative, or allow it to slip through their fingers like sand? The morning sun pierced through the gallery's windows, illuminating the remnants of their late-night brainstorming. As John tidied the scattered papers, he felt the weight of impending judgment heavily on his shoulders. Sipping his now cold coffee, a resolve began to crystallize within him. This was more than an artistic endeavor. It was a defining moment that would demand every ounce of authenticity he could muster. "Ruth," he called, trying to draw her from her thoughts. "Let's refine our narrative. We must capture the heart of our installation in a way that's undeniable. It can't just be visuals. We need a story that speaks." Ruth looked up, her face a mixture of eagerness and trepidation. "You mean something like a personal account or testimony?" "Exactly. A voice that embodies our vulnerability," he said. "But we must balance it. We can't drown in our stories. It must invite others in, not overwhelm them." As they delved deeper into the project, John realized he was stepping into uncharted territory, one that resonated with his own fears. Their intended message called for honesty, an honesty that could unravel the tightly wound knots of doubt within him. It dawned upon him that revealing their own struggles might not only connect with the audience but could serve as catharsis for himself. "Let's think about the high points of our experiences. What have we battled through?" he asked Ruth, pacing their small workspace, enthusiasm growing with every step. "What if we frame our installation as a journey of endurance? Every setback, every fear we've faced, it might create a more profound connection." As ideas started to fly between them, John began to sift through memories, those moments where he felt the wall closing in, where doubt threatened to suffocate his aspirations. He thought of the time he nearly backed down from pursuing art altogether, overshadowed by peers seemingly more talented. Slowly, these recollections morphed into fuel for their narrative. But amidst this surge stood another challenge. Would he truly reveal those stories? Opening his past wounds to an audience meant risking vulnerability, a prospect he'd long avoided. Yet, was avoiding pain the path to authentic connection? "John, are you okay?" Ruth's voice wove through his introspection. "You've gone quiet." He took a breath, grounding himself. "I'm just thinking. Challenging myself, I guess. It's uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable can be good. It means we're pushing boundaries," she replied, her nod an encouragement. He felt a flicker of power in her words, and in that moment John realized that growth often lay in discomfort. The harsh edge of vulnerability felt like a double-edged sword he could wield, one that could both bleed him dry and elevate their work to new heights. Together they began crafting scripts and sketches that conveyed raw, unfiltered emotions. The more they worked, scenes of triumph paired with haunting memories emerged, a dual narrative of struggle and redemption. Yet, as the emotional resonance expanded, a gnawing fear clawed at John's gut. What if they exposed too much? "Ruth, do you think our honesty might be too much?" He hesitated, pondering the thought of his past echoing back through the eyes of strangers. "What if we push people away instead of bringing them in?" Ruth paused, measuring her response. "Honesty is a gamble, John, but if we hold back out of fear, we might lose the connection we're striving for. We have to trust our audience." Her unwavering conviction steadied him. John had to embrace this newfound philosophy of openness, even when it felt fragile. Swallowing his fear, he resolved to transform those insecurities into power, both in their art and within himself. As they finalized each component, the date of unveiling crept closer, and with it, a growing sense of urgency enveloped him. Every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, now coalesced into a singular purpose, to forge a narrative that transcended their own fears. But just as they prepared to present their vision to the world, a new concern arose. Underneath the thrill of creation lay the prickling dread of vulnerability. Would their audience see reflections of their own struggles, or merely judge their open wounds? Just as he began to settle these thoughts, Lucas's familiar voice pierced through his mind. The time had come to face their fears, not only in art but in the very essence of who they were. A confrontation loomed, raising the stakes higher than before. Yet it wasn't merely a stage unveiling, it was a reckoning that could change everything. As they took a deep breath, ready to share their masterpiece, the tremendous realization settled heavily. Exposing one's truth was the truest art of all. An enactment of fear turned to courage. Would they emerge recognized for this bravery, or would it unravel them? Only time would tell. The day had arrived. The gallery pulsed with anticipation as John and Ruth stood before their art installation, the culmination of an intense journey. The room brimmed with curious eyes, their very presence a blend of apprehension and electric excitement. John felt the pulse of uncertainty in his veins, but he also recognized a remarkable transformation within himself. No longer overshadowed by doubt, he was ready to embrace vulnerability, armed with a narrative entwined with their truths. Ruth stood to his side, her once timid demeanor now radiating quiet confidence. They had spent the past few days rehearsing their presentation, aligning their vision with the story they wanted to share. Together, they discovered a newfound strength that emerged from shared experiences. A bond transformed by facing their fears rather than running from them. As guests filled the gallery, John felt his heart race. He could sense both the overwhelming pressure and the nourishing exhilaration that came from being truly seen. As they began to speak, Ruth took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Welcome, everyone. Today we invite you to witness an installation born from vulnerability, pain, and resilience." Her voice, steady and unwavering, set a tone that anchored John in the moment. The pieces of art around them, each canvas emblazoned with raw emotion, vibrant colors, intertwined themes of loss and triumph, were not just visual displays. They were testimonies to their journey. John found himself weaving in and out of their shared narratives, recounting stories filled with heartache, introspection, and ultimately redemption. Each word came alive, a catalyst sparking connections with the audience. They shared their fears and unveiling successes, candidly recounting the awkwardness of their early conversations and the challenges they faced while transforming vulnerability into art. Each moment spent in reflection had molded his understanding of not just Ruth's artistry but his own. He had confronted the critics in his head and embraced the truth they would share, a truth that could resonate beyond mere observation, reaching into the depths of human experience. As the discussion unfolded, John observed faces shift with understanding. The audience began to connect. Subtle nods and glances exchanged spoke volumes. Their stories created ripples, their laughter punctuated with shared empathy. There was something powerful in their relatability, and as he glanced at Ruth, he could feel her joy blossoming amidst the recognition. The culmination of this experience was no longer centered around the possibility of ridicule or judgment, but rather a celebration of their collective honesty. Conversations erupted throughout the gallery, drifting closer, viewers discussing how the artwork evoked intimate memories of their own struggles. It felt as though John and Ruth, through their bravery, unearthed a rawness within others, a shared tapestry of grief, joy, and healing unfurled across the room. By the time the presentation drew to a close, John felt a sense of fulfillment that he had never before experienced. The fears that once plagued him about exposure now paled in comparison to the liberation he felt in being authentically himself. "Thank you for being here with us today," Ruth concluded, a soft smile illuminating her visage. "Art is not just about the finished product, but the journey each of us takes along the way. We hope you take away pieces of our story and reflect on your own." As applause thundered through the room, John stood in awe, a mixture of disbelief and pride surging through him. They had not only showcased Ruth's artistic legacy, but had also unveiled their own transformative journey. It was a profound acknowledgement of everything they had overcome. The burden of doubt now lifted, replaced by a chorus of acceptance. After the presentation, the director approached them with a warm smile. "That was exceptional," she praised, her eyes sparkling with genuine enthusiasm. "I can see the emotional depth in your work. This is just the beginning. We must talk about future exhibitions." John felt a rush of gratitude, while a tinge of disbelief washed over him. He had conquered his insecurities not just for himself but for Ruth, finally bringing her artistic soul to light. Each barrier they'd faced had catapulted them towards this triumphant moment. He realized they had reshaped not only their narratives, but potentially the very landscape they operated within. Months passed since that transformative day. John had embraced a new role, not merely as a business mogul, but as a champion for storytelling through art. Enabling Ruth to explore her creativity sparked even broader opportunities towards community engagement, and they initiated workshops encouraging others to use art as a means for expressing their own stories. Together, they had forged a path that transcended the boundaries of their initial fears and began carving out space for vulnerability and empowerment in the art world. The bond between mother and son deepened with each class taught and every shared narrative celebrated. In those moments, John felt an overwhelming peace envelop him. He had transformed not only a pillar of his own existence, but had also helped revive the invaluable legacy of his mother. He was no longer just a self-made man defined by wealth. He was a beacon of artistic justice, thriving through authenticity. And in forming this new narrative, John stepped forward with the confidence of someone ready to embrace whatever came next. He had emerged victorious on multiple fronts. They had reclaimed their identities in art, entwined with experiences that would inspire and challenge for generations to come. As they stood together in the gallery one last time before the next exhibition, a shared gratitude with Ruth radiating between them, every struggle now reverberated with profound meaning, punctuated by a solid foundation that had transformed their lives. With the sun setting in the background, John felt an exhilarating sense of fulfillment wash over him. This was indeed a moment of growth, a personal achievement born from confrontation and clarity. As he walked away from the gallery with Ruth, he knew he'd arrived at a new chapter, one filled with promise, creativity, and uncompromising authenticity, a journey worth taking at any cost. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.